All right. Once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Donrell A. B. Johnson. I am your speaker for this evening. Just a little ground rules before I get started. Again, if you have any questions about any of the information that I'm sharing here, you can connect with me on my social media channels. Just send me a private message. Basically, use the link that you use to get registered, and it will give you access to that information. Also, I recommend you take some notes on what you hear. Maybe you can put some things into play walking right out of this event. This information will be practical, things that maybe you've been thinking about up to this point, or I might, share a few new, fresh ideas for you to kind of think about moving forward. For those of you who don't know my background, I am a certified executive coach. I specialize in business and lifestyle strategies. The areas that I focus in specifically is helping people become more self-aware and creating well-being in many different areas of their life, whether that be health, finances, relationships, business, career, spiritual path, you name it. I help individuals recognize their strengths and then focus on those things more so than their weaknesses. In a lot of schools of thoughts, people do a great job at pointing out what you're not, the things that you don't do well or what's not working for you. But I kind of do something a little bit different. I take people through a number of different processes to help them identify who they are, what makes them tick, identifying different strengths that they have, and then how to put those strengths in play in anything that they're doing, whether it be in organizational leadership, their own businesses, their career at work, you name it. All right. So that's kind of a little bit of background about me in short. But as we get going, the reason I decided to do this was mainly one, I was asked to kind of do a quick talk on some things, but also my heart has been moved here lately because of just the amazing year that we have come out of. Many things have happened. Some of us, everything's cool with our families and friends, and some of us, maybe we've lost some loved ones and different situations with jobs, finances, and so on and so forth. And I know mentally, that could be pretty heavy on most individuals, whether we know it or not. There are people who we speak to, talk to every day, we walk around every day in our family, friends, maybe coworkers, for those of us who are still having some physical contact there, that, we do a good job at masking, what it is that we're really dealing with. And we don't really let everyone know, what's going on in our lives or what's really bothering us at any particular time. So um, we can, all agree that those things are not healthy. And so it's important that we develop a game plan or an approach to how we handle those things, how we begin to come out of those situations or move forward in a different direction, so that we're not necessarily hung up or things don't get to a point where it becomes a dangerous situation for us. You can pretty much, with things going on with the government and everything, a lot of people are having some stress right now, just mental situations. And so one of the best ways to improve is self-improvement, to begin to look on the other side of your situation, to start thinking about positive things that you could be doing, little baby steps that you could be taking, to put yourself on the other side of whatever you may be dealing with or in the future that you might deal with. So what I like to do with a lot of my clients is kind of take an assessment of where you are. And this is a little exercise you can do with yourself every 3 to 4 months to try to figure out what's really going on with you, what's really bothering you at that time, and what you need to do about it. So in most people's lives, there are just a couple of major areas that if stress happens in these areas, it kind of affects everything else that they're doing. So one is with family. One is with our mental attitude about, any situation. Another one is health. Another area would be career and business, finances, relationships, personal development, like if we feel if we're moving forward or not, if we're going backwards, our social life, And just like I said before, any areas where we feel weak, or maybe we feel strong, but we're not utilizing those in the right way. So I'll say those again if you're taking notes: family, mental attitude, health, career and business, finances, relationships, personal development, our social life, and then I call it self-awareness, but basically it's being aware of who you are and how you're using your strengths or your weaknesses. Now, what I ask people to do is always rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of those areas. So, one, things being not so good; 10, things are great. All right. So, if you went down that list now and you started to rate yourself, anything that's a 7 or above, you're doing okay in that area right now. Anything that's a 5 or below, you may need to start working on it or paying it attention. And then anything that you're scoring a 3 or below in, that's an area that could potentially start causing you some friction in your life. That's the area where the most stress is happening. And so at that point in time, once you identify that, you got to start taking steps on your own to start moving in a different direction. Now, some of that stuff may be externally inflicted, some of that stuff may be internally inflicted. So, if it's internally inflicted, more than likely it is in your control. If it's externally inflicted, then you have to kind of do some things to verify, is it something that you can control? Because it's very hard to control the uncontrollable. All right. And a lot of times we place mental burdens on ourselves because we try to control things that are just way beyond our reach of controlling. Like I'll use, for example, the government. We can argue all day about our beliefs. Who should we should vote for, who should be in office, what they should be doing, this, that, and the third. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do as a citizen to change that. You can express your rights, you can get out there and advocate. You can walk up on Capitol Hill and make some noise with the lobbyists and things of that nature. But after all of that, when you've exhausted all those efforts, what's going to happen is pretty much out of your control. When they go into the chambers and they make decisions, that's it. There's nothing that we really can do. So we have to learn what things to really allow to affect us and what things not. So what I recommend you do moving forward, because now that we're working in a more virtual environment and people are going to be, around less amounts of people, depending on where they work and so on and so forth, our mental health is going to become very important to us. And one thing that has happened now, with this crisis, is that we realize that working from home and educating our kids from home is a very effective way, even though it may not sound like it in the news, and maybe in some households that it may not sound like they're having a great we can get a lot more done without spending a lot of money, and also with not that many people. So this is going to continue to go on. They're pretty much going to build from here. In my opinion, the chances of us going back to what things really used to be 100% won't happen. So it's important that in your life you have some things that are kind of go to for you as far as your mental health. Number one, I recommend getting a coach. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily have a coach, don't understand the importance of having a coach, and for a lot, for many different reasons. But most coaches, they do charge a fee monthly, but in the long run, most people that I know with a coach outperform people who don't have one. They tend to get things done. With a coach in your life, you're able to be more accountable, because a lot of times we set goals and then 30 days later, we're off those goals. We're nowhere near hitting our goals. Like every January, everyone has health goals and finances goals. But by February, March, we're off track with those goals. And a lot of that is because there's no one that's keeping us accountable. Okay. That has a vested interest in what it is that we say we want out of life. If you don't have a coach, I highly recommend you have a mentor. Now, not just someone that you respect because they've achieved a certain level in life, or you guys share a certain environment, and because of what they do in that environment, you respect them. Um, a mentor is someone that you strategically take time to book meetings with them for them to guide you in different directions. Okay. And that's very important. Like a lot of people, they mentor the youth, and you can't mentor youth without putting in the time. That's how the youth spell love: time. How much time are you spending around me? Okay. And so it's the same thing as an adult. It's one thing to say someone's a mentor, but it's another thing to actively pursue that relationship, and to make sure that you're getting something out of it. So that's very important. And then last but not least, a therapist. And this is important because in a lot of communities, this is taboo. We just don't think that we need a therapist. We think that we don't need to talk to anybody about our situations, what's going on, and the different trauma that has happened in our life. And for a lot of us, we've been through a lot of trauma, whether that be things that have happened in our childhood, all the way up into our adulthood, situations that we see on television or going on in our communities, things that have happened in our relationships, and the bottom line is that if you don't heal from those situations, you just continue to carry them into other situations. And for a lot of people, just talking and getting that stuff out, a lot of times when you lose a loved one, um, it affects you, for whatever reason. And many people, we associate PTSD with the military, but I really believe a lot of people do have some case of PTSD just from dealing with life situations and how you respond to it. The loss of a job, a good friend, a relationship ending, finances, filing for bankruptcy. These are all things that can mentally affect us, and those are very clear reasons why it may be important for us to seek a therapist. If you don't have the other two models in your life, a coach or a mentor, then it's important that you start to look at a therapist. Now, when you look at this is an investment in you. So you can't really think about it about like an expense. So you have to think about it as an area of health in your life. And your health is your wealth. I'm sure you heard that before. If you want to live a long time, okay, um, that all depends on the food that you eat and the mental state that you have. Okay. And the food actually helps with the mental state as well, believe it or not. So I just encourage, especially in a lot of the African American communities, therapy is just a taboo. We'll go do therapy when it comes to a physical ailment or situation that we have, but when someone talks about getting some counseling for other things, it's like, no, I don't need that. So fight that thought, fight that thought, especially now, because you may be okay now with everything that is going on, but you never know what can happen 12 to 18 months from now, 2 to 5 years from now. So just keep these things in mind as tools you can use. So coming to a close here in a minute, I want you to start thinking about a couple of things. These are questions that I always ask myself to make sure that I am pursuing something greater. Because in life, you can get to a point where you just start doing the day-to-day things. Things become very monotonous to the point where you're doing it, but you're not really motivated to do it. Nothing is inspiring you. Nothing is driving you or pushing you forward to reach a higher level, or you don't feel that what you're doing has that degree of significance or impact. And this is very important for those of us who own businesses, or those of us who work in social careers, or we do anything in organizational leadership. If you don't feel inspired, if you don't feel like what you're doing is contributing long term to the good of people, a lot of times you'll just back off whatever that is. Okay. Because there are certain personalities in life that seek those type of environments, or that fuel in their life to do something great for others. So one question that I ask myself regularly, okay, and I'm gonna throw it out there for you: who are you? Right? Or who am I? That's a question that we should have an answer to. because the way you answer that question is how you will present yourself to the world. The next question is, why am I here? You know, we all are here for a period of time. None of us knows when we're going to leave or check out of here. And really, they always say the dash in between the time that you're here and the time that you leave is the most important thing on your tombstone. You know, so what did you do with that dash? Or what are you going to do with your dash? Another way to answer that question is, what will people say about you when you're gone? Or what would you like for them to say about you when you're gone? The next thing is goal setting. It's very important to set goals. And not just saying you want to do something, but your goals should be specific and they should have a date on them, right? Because if it's not specific and it doesn't have a date on it, I can almost promise you that it won't happen and you'll never reach it because you didn't give yourself a deadline. Now, I'll be honest with you, most goals, when you set them, you don't hit them the first time you set the goal. But if you give it an honest effort, you may have to push that data back a little bit. If you get to a point where you've reached that deadline and you haven't hit your goal yet, you may have to push it back a little bit. But if you pursued it like you really wanted to reach that goal, then what will happen is you'll be closer to that goal the next time you reset it. And then a lot of people, because they don't mentally understand that failure is very important when it comes to being successful, you don't reset the goal because you associate some type of pain with not hitting the goal that you desire. And I want you to know that struggle is a part of life. It builds character. In order to be successful in anything, you have to be willing to fail a lot. You have to be willing to be embarrassed. You have to be willing to look like a fool. You have to be willing to do things that you never thought you would do, you know, as long as it's honest, legal, and ethical, you know. But when we admire people who are successful in life and they're not doing anything any better than us, they just put themselves out there more. So that's a position that we want to be in. Um, you know, what are your strengths? What are you good at? You know, how have you identified those things? You know, in all the different things that you do in your life, what shows up in a consistent manner that you feel strong at? You know, what are your values? You know, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to health, when it comes to your social life, when it comes to your spiritual life, what are your values? If you had to come up with 3 or 4 words that represented your values, what are they? Right? Because that's what makes you tick. And if you're not leading with your values every day, then I promise you, you're in a state where you're not really happy with how things are going. And when we're not happy with how things are going, we begin to self-medicate. And there are many ways that people do that. All right. But, and I won't go into a deep dive on that. But the bottom line is we have to take control over the things that we can control. The next thing is, do you have a spiritual discipline or have you fallen away from it? You know, whatever that may be. You know, many people have different ways that they express their faith or their beliefs. And sometimes you're very strong in that area for a period in your life, and then sometimes you kind of fall away from it, and you have to regroup, you know, and refocus and get back into that practice, whatever that practice may be. You know, how are you doing in that area right now? All right. Another thing is pride and ego. You know, many of us, I even have this sometimes, and I have to correct myself, is you feel like you know everything or you don't need any help, you know, and pride and ego is just a terrible thing because if you can't admit, you know, maybe you lack in certain areas, or that you may not know everything, or maybe that you don't understand everything, right? Then you can't ever get help. You can't ever progress, right? That means you have reached a plateau in life, and there's nowhere else for you to go until you recognize that, you know, I can do more, I can learn more, you know, I can understand more, I can apply myself more, um, you know, I can learn new skill sets, you know, new ways to approach life to put myself in a better situation. Maybe I can control my environment more, you know, because that's important. Like who we hang around really dictates a lot. It dictates how we spend our money. It dictates what we think about. It dictates our emotions. So that's very important, learning to control your environment. Okay. Um, and that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with you. I hope that this information has helped you in some kind of way. If you follow me on my social media channels, I try all the time to be an inspiring person, to throw out information that makes you think, um, that gets you kind of moving in a direction and asking yourself questions. Hopefully, people don't walk away from my content feeling bad about themselves in any way. It's just to make you open up, right? And here's what I truly believe: if you begin to work on yourself, self improvement, everything you're involved with will benefit. You know, whether it's your business, whether it's an organization, whether it's parenting, relationships, you name it. If you spend the bulk of your time just saying every day I'm gonna get better. Every day I'm gonna find things to be thankful for and have gratitude for, and I'm gonna get better. Then everything you're involved in at that point, you will begin to change lives. You will begin to touch people if you come up with a plan for a lot of the things that I mentioned here in this session. So I've enjoyed you. Again, if you have any questions about anything that I shared, you need a little deeper dive or some resources on what I talked about, that link that you used to register this evening, you can go on there, connect with me on social media, send me a private message, and I'll do my best to help you, the best way that I can. So with that, enjoy the rest of your evening and have a good one.